All right, test 2, passage number 3 from section 2. Here we go. Number 23 is a grammar question. It says it has long been known that sea otters living along the west coast of North America help keep kelp forests in their habitat healthy and vital. So in this one, what you want to be able to see is first off the phrase sea otters. Now what they do is they say sea otters, which are living along the west coast of North America, help. Sea otters help. So we're dealing with plural, sea otters, plural noun. So the verb going with it should be help, not helps. These things help. So in this case, I don't need to put any extra information there as well. So when you're doing 23, it's good the way it is. When you say they help, that's just a little bit redundant. We already know who they are. It's just sea otters, so it's not ambiguous. So I'd get rid of that. And help too. So when you say sea otters that live along the west coast and help, that's not good either. It should say sea otters help. And then same thing with D. It is too wordy here. We don't need all those extra words. A is clear and concise. It has the proper subject verb here, so we are good to go on 23. It should be A. 24 says which choice offers an accurate interpretation of the data in the chart. So we have to look at this chart and we need to make sure the data is good, because they're going to give us some information in this the underlined portion. It needs to match that chart. So let's see which one does that. So answer choice A says, in fact, 2 years or less of sea otters can completely eliminate. Now that is a strong word when you say completely eliminate, so we need to make sure there's absolutely nothing left. So again, 2 years or less is going to be right here. And sea otters, 2 years or less, completely eliminate sea urchins. There are a little bit there. There's not very many. So they're not, notice they're completely eliminated after 10 years, but not after 2. So it's not going to be answer choice A. With answer choice B, says even 2 years or less otter presence can reduce the sea urchin threat. And that's what we were noticing here. There are fewer, so that does hold true. C says kelp density. Now that's not even mentioned here, so I'm not even going to look at it. And D says even after sea otters were present for 10 years or more, kelp density was still lower than sea urchin density. Again, I'm thinking kelp density and sea urchin density doesn't really seem to match. I mean, I guess they have it here, but it doesn't seem to match the way they're stating it. So I'll state that again so you can kind of see what we're talking about. Even after sea otters were present, so again, even after 10 years, they was still lower. Now, again, still lower means, at first you'll see that the kelp density was lower, but after that, when you're saying the kelp density was still lower, well, that's not true here. I mean, the kelp density is actually way higher, and it got, it's increasing in how much higher it is, to the point where there's really no sea urchins at all. So this is just kind of saying the opposite of what they should be saying. So anyway, B is going to be your answer for number 24. Number 25, looks like we have some transitional phrases here that go right after the sentence we just read. So with 24, it says, in fact, even 2 years or less of sea otter presence can reduce the sea urchin threat. And then it says without sea otters present. So now we're going to say, well, what if there were no sea otters? Okay, so no otters presence. Kelp forests run the danger of becoming barren stretches of coastal wasteland. So we're looking for a negative trigger because they're kind of going the opposite way here. So I would get rid of A, probably not likewise. Hence, it's more likely going to be however here, because you're saying one thing and then however if it was the other way around. So B is going to be your answer for 25. It is a proper negative trigger in this situation. So moving on to 26. says at this point, the writer's considering adding the following information. So if you're going to add this information, again, it has to be consistent with the main idea of this paragraph. So let's read that paragraph. It says what was less well known, until recently at least, was how this relationship among sea otters, sea urchins, and kelp forests might help fight global warming. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased 40%. It looks like right now they're talking about global warming, and that's what you'll notice as you read through this paragraph. It's about global warming, and the what makes up global warming, I should say. So this sentence that we're getting into, sentence number 2, says the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased 40%. Now, right off the bat, when you see this statement, I need some additional information, because when you just say 40%, you have to say it's changed or it's increased 40%, say, since this time. You have an amount to compare it to. So it should have something. So that's one reason why you should say yes. The other reason is here in this sentence that we're adding, when it says, first off, since the start of the Industrial Revolution, resulting in a rise in global temperatures. So that also relates it to the global warming construct. So everything here tends to match. It gives you a time period that the 40% increase from, and it relates it back to global temperatures or global warming. So it's going to be yes. And then your reason is, in this case, is you got to check these. It says because it establishes a relationship between the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and global warming. Again, it does relate it back to global warming, which is good. Or because it explains the key role sea otters, sea urchins, and kelp forests play in combating global warming. None of that was really mentioned in that sentence. So in this case, your answer choice A is going to be a little bit better. So that's going to be 26. 27. Looks like we're dealing with some dashes, maybe some commas, things like that. So it says a recent study by 2 professors at the University of California, Santa Cruz, Chris Wilmers and James Estes, suggests that kelp forests protected by sea otters can absorb as much as 12 times the amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as those where sea urchins are allowed to devour the kelp. So in this sentence, we are looking for the proper punctuation or lack thereof in this sentence. And with this, when you see suggest that, that clause should be without a comma. Typically, there's no real need to have it. You also see it's kind of be a lot of pausing going on here. Chris Wilmers and James Estes suggests that kelp forest protected by sea otters is going to be a little off here. You don't need a dash either. There's no long pause here, definitely. There's definitely not also going to be a quotation. There's no reason why you would have that, because it doesn't have an ending. There should be an end to that quotation somewhere. So that would be a terrible option. And like I said, you don't need the punctuation here. We're going to pick the more clear, concise answer. The shorter is better. And that's using getting rid of, usually in this case, getting rid of unnecessary punctuation. So 27 should just be D. 28. So here it looks like they're trying to pick which words would work in context. So in this case, they're saying 12 times the amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is those where sea urchins are allowed to what? So in this case, we have to see which ones would most fit this sentence. We say devour the kelp. That would mean to destroy it. So in this case, it's kind of what they're doing. They're destroying the kelp. They're getting rid of it completely. Because that's really what we're looking at when we looked at the chart. And as we've been reading, they completely get rid of it. So that would possibly fit. So you'd want to keep that as a potential option. And then as you keep going, it says dispatch the kelp is not really, again, trying to completely get rid of it, which is what the passage has been stating so far. Overindulge, I don't know if really that would fit either. Overindulging, I mean, maybe they're not overindulging. Maybe it's normal for them to get rid of all of it, so that's fine. Dispose of, I mean, they're not really disposing it. That means you're taking it somewhere else. That's not helping, so they're just getting rid of it. They're devouring it. They're eating it. So A is probably going to be your best answer for that one, so 28 is going to be A. 29, like their terrestrial plant cousins. Here we're talking about kelp. And you have to understand when you're dealing with the phrase kelp, it's a collective noun. So it should be singular, so it's not going to be A or B. It's with an apostrophe, you can think of it like it is, which wouldn't fit here either. So like it is terrestrial plant cousins would not fit. So in this case, 29 should be C. It's singular. It goes with kelp, the collective noun kelp, singular, it's. So that's 29. 30. Just again, we're looking at the sentence and see what the best version of the sentence based on the options they give us. As you read the sentence, it says again, scientists knew this but did not recognize how large a role they played. Now, when I read this, I don't know what the they is. You may know because you've been reading the passage, but in the context of this sentence, it's not clear. So we are going to need to fix that. So it's not going to be A. It, same problem. We don't know what it is. C says how large a role sea otters played, so at least we're telling us what they are. And then scientists knew this but did not recognize that they played such a large role. So the only one that fixes the error here is going to be C. So C is your answer for number 30. Number 31, where is the most logical place in this paragraph to add the following sentence? So in this case, we want to read the sentence, see if we can find any clues here. So one of the clues I can see right away is this transitional phrase. But what Wilmers and Estes discovered in their study, therefore, surprised them. So as you're looking through the sentences, you're going to see one that's going to state something that ends up being a surprise. And we're looking at the next sentence, when we do that. So the one that would do this, again, is going to be after sentence 5, when they say scientists knew this, but did not recognize how large of a role that sea otters actually played in helping kelp forests to significantly decrease the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So again, they didn't realize how big a role they played. Therefore, they were surprised when they did their study. So, and then the next sentence, if you read, it says, far from making no difference to the ecosystem, the presence of sea otters was found to increase the carbon storage of kelp forests by 4.4 to 8.7 megatons annually, which is offsetting, I'm right here, by the way, offsetting the amount of carbon dioxide emitted by 3 million to 6 million passenger cars each year. So, again, they stated that they didn't know how large a role they played. They were therefore surprised, and then sentence 6 kind of shows how big of a surprise it actually was. So that's why 31 should be D. And again, check all of these as you go through, but that's what we should be looking for on number 31. 32, Wilmers and Estes caution, however, that, and then here we want to see which of these options are going to fit the best. So they caution that having more otters will not automatically solve the problem of higher levels of carbon dioxide in the air. So that's what we originally have. And that original one doesn't really seem to fit the tone. I mean, it's not really, it's a little informal. It's like having more otters. Usually there's a better way to state that. And they will test that, the more appropriate tone based on the rest of the way the rest of this passage is written. When you read some other ones, hopefully you'll see ones that sound better based on the quality of writing. So Wilmers and Estes caution, however, that increasing the otter population is a little bit better in tone, more formal than having more otters. So I'm going to get rid of A. B is a little bit better. The otters multiplying is not matching the tone either. Having more otters in other locations is just too wordy. So 32, the best tone here, the best register, this is register here, is going to be B. And the next up, 33. In this one, we just want to see, we're checking, looks like a little bit of punctuation on this one. So the way this sentence is stated, it looks like we have the model of how carbon can be sequestered, and then they're kind of saying or removed from the atmosphere. So they're trying to kind of say it can be sequestered or removed, and it's kind of in a way kind of describing, if you're sequestering it, it's another way to do it is to remove it. So when we state this, we already have a comma here, and you look at the answer choices. If you're going to have a comma, this is almost like its own separate clause. So if you're going to have your own clause here, you shouldn't end that clause with a semicolon. You should be ending it with another comma. So the key is on this one, it's not A, and C is a little bit too many commas as you kind of look at them. So I'm looking at or removed from with a comma, or you can just say or removed. So again, when you say sequestered, the other one would be removed. So we have sequestered, comma, or removed, which is its own clause, comma, which means you should be able to get rid of that statement and say the model is a good model of how carbon can be sequestered from the atmosphere. So in this case, we should have the comma before from, not after from, because if you cut the whole thing out, you'd say carbon can be sequestered the atmosphere. Would not make sense. So when we trim the fat on this, we don't want to trim too much. So in this case, our answer for number 33 is going to be D.